Welcome to the All In Podcast, the show that explores how the top real estate entrepreneurs have gone all in on their businesses. I'm your host, David Morse, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, and I invite you to come along with us as we explore the stories of the most elite professionals in the game today to learn how they went all in and how you and I can do the same. So I just have to ask, are you all in? Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of the All In Podcast. I'm your host, David Moore, CEO and team leader at Keller Williams, Arizona Realty in Scottsdale, with my good friend and co-host,
Joe Quattrucci, Director of Growth, Kristen Cole Network.
Awesome. Guys, today we have Mr. Dave Jenks, a legend in the real estate community, and I'm so excited that we have an opportunity to talk to him. Mr. Dave Jenks, how are you?
I'm doing good. A legend in my own mind, right?
Well, and a legend in our minds. We're so pumped to have you on this episode. We're gonna have a really fun
Thank you.
Conversation today.
Dave, by the way, I love your title, All In, because I think that is how you get things done in life. Go all in.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Thanks so much for being here. Give our listeners kind of an overview of who you are and what it is that you do within real estate.
Well, what's interesting is I'm in my encore years, right? So I'm in my 70s. So in many ways, I'm kind of doing that gig after you've done the main performance and played your songs and all that. Now you come back to the audience, after the standing ovation and say, okay, now I want to play for you a song I really love, right? And so I'm kind of in those encore years, which means I can do whatever I want. And so for much of that time, I did a lot of research and reading. I've done a whole series of things in preparation for writing a book called Seeker, A Journey Toward Wisdom. And I have 20 podcasts of that. And then I have 7 more podcasts later on the spiritual end of that called The 7 Incarnations of God. But that's been a passion of mine. Curiosity and research and wisdom is really something I embrace and go after. And then I saw about a year and a half ago, as an industry watcher, I saw Gary Keller get replugged in. And I realized that it was probably a really good time for me to go back to the roots that I had in real estate and reconnect with people with a really strong real estate message. And I just happen to believe, not just because I was part of it, but I evolved into it, that Keller Williams is the most powerful real estate company ever invented. And that's not a marketing pitch. It's I can go through the analysis, which we probably don't have time to do here, but I really know that it is the most powerful real estate company ever built. And so I want to just help it go to its next phase.
Interesting. So I love that phraseology. You said an industry watcher, and we're gonna get into that throughout the show here. How you've watched and what some of your unique observations about our industry are. But I want to step back. I want to bring us all the way back to the beginning of your career, and I want to hear about your progression into real estate in the first place. Like, what did that look like?
Well, what's interesting is that was actually a late engagement. I was already 40 years old before I even got into real estate. And I would say that the theme of my life is a personal development guru and teacher. That's kind of what it's become. Now, I started out just kind of pursuing my own interests in understanding human behavior, human psychology. I worked on a doctorate in educational psychology. I actually have what they call two ABDs. All but dissertations, right? So I have a master's degree in higher education. Then I went and I took 3 years and studied counseling psychology, and then 3 years and studied educational psychology. Wanted to understand learning and motivation. Never got a degree in either one, probably because I'm too pragmatic, and not really academic. I'm certainly willing to do the research, and my curiosity drives me there. But I really want to go do something, right? I mean, I want to make things happen. And so what was interesting was I got engaged then sort of accidentally through a friend in the world of business, the graphic arts industry, and became VP of sales and marketing. And then kind of as part of my preparation to do that, I took the Dale Carnegie sales course. Then I became an instructor for the Dale Carnegie sales organization, not full-time. That was always a part-time gig. And I say all of that because every step of the way, what it meant was I was involved in personal development and then teaching. and then deployment in businesses, entrepreneurship. I love entrepreneurship. I think this whole economy was built on entrepreneurs and people willing to take the risk of going into business for themselves. So when I got introduced through, again, another friend of mine who was taking a class from me with the Dale Carnegie Institute and said, what are you going to do after you get your doctorate? And I said, I want to teach sales and leadership to organizations that really that's their focus. And he said, I'm a part of an organization like that. And I said, oh, what is it? Actually, I knew what it was. I said, Century 21. And he said, yeah, we have people that do that. They need you. So he put me in touch with their regional office. And a month later, I was working with them up in upstate New York. And I became director of training for them, and then a regional director, and then ultimately a divisional president for them. They moved me down to Texas. And that was before I joined Keller Williams. But that's how I got in the real estate business. Yeah.
So you went from graphic artist in that world and went into real estate, and the connecting thread was this idea of personal development.
It is. The whole connecting thread of all of this is personal development, learning skills, learning skills of influence, so learning sales skills, learning presentation skills, learning lead generation skills. I think everything worth doing in life requires you to be a person of influence. You have to connect with people. You have to be able to convey to them your interests, your value proposition. You have to understand theirs. You have to make a presentation if you want some outcome, right? Whatever outcome that is, you have to make a presentation. And then all along that way, and this was what I really teamed up very much with Gary Keller, we both became readers and students of the whole game of business development and personal achievement. And I think that would be kind of, if there was an underlying theme of my life, that's what it is.
So Dave, bring us back to Century 21. While you were there, you were moving up through the ranks. What were some of the biggest lessons you learned during that time that prepared you for your eventual transition to KW?
What's interesting about that is that I began by understanding the challenges of being a real estate agent. I had done those. Now I was in the graphic arts industry, but I was a salesperson. I wasn't doing the art. We were doing the design and the printing and newsletters, and I was selling that. So I was a salesman, marketeer. But I really learned that if you understand selling and marketing, then what you really have to understand is the particular game. So I became a student of the real estate game. I never sold real estate. I just became a student of the game. I worked with all the top agents at that time in Century 21, and I learned what they did that worked. And I could ask the kind of questions and get the wisdom from them about what they did, right? So I became kind of this guru of personal achievement for salespeople, but then at the same time for people that were running brokerages, because there's two different things. There's one thing to be a salesperson, like a real estate agent, a professional real estate agent, and there's another thing to be an entrepreneur who's building a company of entrepreneurs, right? Or salespeople. And that's a different set of skills, and I think I learned those in Century 21. But one thing I learned, and I'll tell you, this is a funny one, was that I was a district manager for Century 21 in Syracuse, New York. And I was doing some goal setting, and I wrote down that I wanted to become regional director for Century 21 for that region, or for a region. And that was a 3-state region. And then this question came to me, well, Dave, yeah, but wouldn't that be really stressful? To be the CEO of a company like that and everyone counting on you, wouldn't that be stressful? And I came to this big aha. I couldn't be more stressed than I already was. Now, I think that's true for a lot of people. What you get when you go to a higher level of responsibility is more resources, right? You get more people you can call on, more people you can use, more budget, that kind of thing. But once you sort of max out on the stress factor, then you just ride it from there on.
That's a really interesting paradigm shift.
Take it to another level of stress. I teach that in stress, seminars I do, and that is invite it. All great athletes bring on stress. They put themselves under stress, like Navy SEALs bring on stress. Performers bring on a bigger crowd, bring on a more demanding audience. Bring it on, because the more you learn to deal with stress, the more it doesn't set you off. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, those are all good analogies too. You have to have that stress in order to grow and stretch.
You have to. I think that and you guys, when you challenge yourself to run a really good podcast and all that stuff, you've got all your gear. And, somebody could be sitting there worrying, well, what if this goes wrong or what if that goes wrong? But what you do is you just learn to be calm in the game and play the game.
Yeah, definitely. So you've risen through the ranks of Century 21. You're learning all of this amazing stuff again as you observe, as you are a student of the game of real estate. I want to know, how did you get in relationship with Gary Keller? And take us back there, because depending on what year that was, were you the one that was like, who are you?
Well, no, I'm a watcher, right? So here, I've been moved to become a divisional president of Century 21 in Dallas, Texas, running 7 states, 700 plus offices, a big company, big responsibility, and all of that. So I'm watching my competition, and this is in 1988. Well, this was just as Gary Keller was gathering together his top agents to reinvent his company after 6 of his top people had left for RE/MAX. And the market was in the tanks down in Texas at that time, worse really than happened in 2007, 2008. That late 80s, early 90s was terrible in Texas, right, in the Southwest. And so I'm watching, and I talk to my people, my Century 21 people, and say, well, what's your competition doing? Well, there's this new game in town called Keller Williams, and I said, tell me a little bit about it, and they did. And it kind of made me, wow, I thought that's very curious, right? I mean, it's very curious. And I was a student of the game, and I knew that in my heart, I think I knew that Century 21 was not the future of real estate. Even though we were blowing and going, we were number 1 in the world, RE/MAX was starting to catch up with us. There was a big lawsuit about them passing us and Century 21 taking them to court and losing it in court. They were trying to say that RE/MAX was overstating its production. So anyway, RE/MAX passed Century 21, but Century 21 was blowing and going. They were the big deal. And what I knew was that advertising didn't draw customers. Advertising did not draw clients. Clients picked agents. If I had an agent that left Century 21 and went down the street, so did their clients. They weren't loyal to the company. So when I saw this little company in Austin that did no advertising and allowed their agents to promote themselves, under their brand, I went, that's very interesting. Then when a couple of people started to tell me about the profit share system, I went, okay, that is very interesting. Now, I didn't really think I would work for them. I thought I would still continue to climb up in Century 21, and I was making a lot of changes in Century 21 because there were things that they were doing that just didn't make sense. They were owned by MetLife, and they were getting very corporate when they used to be very entrepreneurial. And they used to be very field-oriented and oriented toward the franchisees, but they kept getting more and more corporate. And in fact, that's what ended me with them. I actually got fired from Century 21 because, and this is a great story, but I prevented my number 1 owner from leaving. She came in to me, Marcy Barton. She said, Dave, I'm not going to renew my franchise this fall. This was in 1993. And I said, well, Marcy, what are you going to do? She said, I'm joining Keller Williams. I went, that little pyramid company down in Austin, you're going to join them? Come on, man. You've been with Century 21 15 years. She said, no, I learned more about the future of real estate with an afternoon with Gary Keller than I've ever learned with anyone in Century 21. So I said, what would it take to keep you? So we went through this whole negotiation that involved me co-venturing her expansion because she was the only office I had that knew how to compete against RE/MAX. And so I cut what I thought was the sweetest deal to keep her in. And I thought this would become a model for Century 21, but I got called into the office and I had been told I overstepped my boundaries and I got fired.
Wow.
So it's funny. I got a call from Mo Anderson who said, Dave, that's great news. Now you can join Keller Williams. And I went, Mo, I just lost this big cushy job. What are you doing? You're saying this is great. So anyway, she put me in touch with Gary Keller. And it took a couple of years because of the changes Gary was going through. He hadn't committed yet to hiring a CEO. And when he finally did in 94 and he had Mo apply for the job, Mo actually hired me and paid me as a consultant to help her prepare for her interviews to be CEO of Keller Williams. Because she said, Dave, I've never run a franchise system and you know everything about it. So we would role play the answer to the questions, all that. And then she calls me up and says, I got the job and you're going to be my first hire. But it took a year after that because of the things that were going on there. So it was really through Mo Anderson that I got connected with Gary Keller. I think Gary Keller says a wonderful thing, and he's just, he's such an honest, straight shooter. He really is. So when someone asked him, how come you were reluctant to bring Dave into the company? And he said, well, I couldn't understand why I would want in my cutting edge new company somebody who was stupid enough to stay with Century 21 for 12 years. Isn't that great? So, but that's really it. He saw me as a corporate type with the whole Century 21 mindset. And I did not have that. I was a gadfly in Century 21. I'd go to regional meetings and I'd be the guy asking all the embarrassing questions. And what about this? And what about this? So they didn't quite understand that I was really much more of a modern trendsetter and desirous of making things better than I was of just being a corporate player. And I'm glad that all happened, because I really wouldn't, once Realogy took over, Century 21 was done, as a really good idea.
I love this. I love this conversation just because it's such a high level industry perspective, peeking back into the 80s and the 90s, and we'll get into the early 2000s. Because for a lot of our listeners, like they don't really know how the chess pieces were moving back then, and
that's right.
Reinvention of companies, which is happening right now, right? We talk about revolution in the real estate industry. So bring us now into late 90s, early 2000s. We need to talk about the book that gets mentioned on almost every episode. Because you had a hand in writing it, and I want to know about that.
Well, I tell you, before we get there, though, there's an interesting thing, because you just said the industry was, so what happened was, first there was franchising, right? That was the Century 21 and Remax and all those, and Gallery of Homes and Red Carpet and a bunch of others that people can't even remember now, that where franchising became the big deal. And then there came the corporate, and they snuck in with TWA buying Century 21, and then realizing that there was no synergy between a airline and a real estate company. And so they then put it up on bid, and MetLife won the bid, and they won it in a tricky way by upping their bid just enough to beat Prudential. They just figured out what Prudential would offer, and they offered 100,000 more. So they got Century 21, and it really ticked off Prudential. So they went out and bought Merrill Lynch and did a bunch of other things, and they got in the game. And of course, now they're out. They're out of the game. But all of that was going on, and then you got the real corporate, the Wall Street people. So Realogy, originally they were HFS, Hospitality Franchise Systems. They owned a whole chain of like eight different hotel motels. And then they bought Century 21. Then they bought ERA. Then they bought Coldwell Banker. Right? Boom, 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 within like 6 or 8 months. So when they called me, I had left Century 21 by then. I wasn't with Keller Williams yet. And I got a call from John Snodgrass, who was their EVP and kind of their takeover specialist. And he said, Dave, we've heard so much about you in interviewing our Century 21 brokers. They really want us to bring you back. Would you meet with us? So I did. And I tell this story because it's going to tell a very interesting thing that's going on right now. I walked into his office, and, like any good salesman, you try and take charge. And I went, hey, John, this is amazing. Good to meet you. By the way, why would a company like you that was specializing in hospitality and hotel franchising, why would you get into real estate? And his answer, I'll never forget it. He said, Dave, we were looking for another industry where management was disorganized and labor was overpaid. You hear that? Management was disorganized and labor was overpaid. And he said real estate was perfect. We knew we could come in with our marketing power and capture more of the commission from the agents and make the system run more efficiently. So that's what happens when you get the Wall Street players And that's still true with the technology players. I mean, there have been other ones that have come before the ones that are there now. They think they can come in and change the real estate industry. They can take it away from being a personal service relationship-based business and turn it into a marketing technology venture, where their marketing and technology takes the agent out of the game or minimizes their role. And the neat thing about Keller Williams right now, and it's always been true, by the way, is that Gary Keller believes that fundamental to the real estate business is the real estate agent acting as a fiduciary in the relationship with the seller or buyer, looking out for their interests, negotiating for their interests, helping them get through this legally, financially complicated transaction, and that really matters. It makes a difference in the transaction, is what he's saying. It's not just, this isn't like selling CDs, or selling soap. This is really a very complicated transaction. And yeah, you can try and organize it, but you need a personal person there to do it. So anyway, I think that we've still got now another bunch of players coming in thinking they can do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And even today, Dave, I think that's what probably distinguishes Keller Williams from the rest, is that Gary Keller still believes and is still very vocal about keeping the agent as the fiduciary in enabling his agents, our brokerages across the country, enabling those agents with technology rather than enabling technology with the work of the agents.
That's right. No, that's right. I mean, that's his cut at it, and I think he's right. And I think the technology companies, they just think that it's just a technology marketing issue, right? If you master marketing and you master technology, then that's what matters, and the relationship doesn't. And so it'll be an interesting test. I mean, it's an interesting game right now, because that's what's on the table. That's what we're dealing with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So fascinating. We're going to get into that more. Okay. I know we are. Can we get into the Red Book now?
Oh yeah. Okay. So here's the funny thing. So I joined Gary, and the first thing he says to me, this is like, the summer of 1996, he said, Dave, we got to build Keller Williams University. I've said we're a training and consulting company. We're not. We haven't been there. He said, I've done a few courses. I've done a few informal courses, but he said, as a system, we need to form Keller Williams University. And so I became the first dean of Keller Williams University, and he and I built the first 6 courses, which were business courses targeted at agents. In other words, the courses were for agents and brokers, but it was how to be an entrepreneur, how to build a business, how to think like a business person, even though you're a real estate agent. Then I did and created 6 what we called APTs, agent productivity training. And so we had six business, 6 agent, and we rolled those out. We built a faculty. We started doing that. We started doing masterminds. And the more masterminds we did, the more we started working with agents, of course, that were building teams. Or were wanting to. They were wanting to get bigger, and they were wanting to know, how do you do it? And we would talk with them about it. We would have masterminds. And so for probably, probably for 6 years, we really were working very strongly with agents. We did things for them, like we created this chart of the 172 tasks of a real estate agent and how you organized them in 7 functions, and then how you took those across to the 7 levels as you increased the number of people on your staff, and what they did, how those 175 tasks would split out to different people along that way. So it was this really, because what Gary and I brought to the table that most agents don't have is this business strategic analytic mindset. We can get really, into the weeds. We can get into the weeds, but what we say is that simplicity comes from complexity. Until you understand the complexity, you can't get the simplicity. If you just try and go straight to simplicity, you go to simple-minded, and you don't do something. So we went really deep in terms of job descriptions, in terms of the economics of it, in terms of lead generation, in terms of how you use your database and all that. And then what you have each person do on your team. And then that's where we invented the concept of the 7th level. That at the level 1, you're doing it all yourself. Level 2, you have an assistant. Level 3, you have 2 assistants. Level 4 is you delegate part of the buyer side. Level Level 5 is you delegate the listing side. Level 6 is you become the CEO of it. And level 7 is you're the owner of it and you have somebody else in that CEO role. And so we had that vision in mind and we could see it. We were teaching it. We were doing it in our masterminds, and we had a thing called MAPS, Mega Agent Productivity Systems. It was a course, MAPS, MAPS. That actually was what we changed it to Mega Achievement Productivity Systems to make it MAPS, the consulting part of the company. But originally, that's what we were teaching it before it became the book. And the other thing that's fun, if you get an old example of this, you'll love it. We started crafting a book called The Remarkable Real Estate Sales Business Game. And it had a kind of a clunky cover in it. And those words were important. We would say it was the Remarkable Real Estate Sales Business Game. You want to make it a business, not just a sales game. And then every time we had Mega Camp, which was in the fall every year, we would hand that out with now a few extra pages in it. So it kept getting thicker and thicker, the Millionaire Real Estate, the Remarkable Real Estate Sales Business Game. So if you ever see a copy of that laying around somewhere, pick it up, because that's the precursor. So what happened was, in 2002, Gary Keller, after family reunion, got together with us. We had just come through 9/11, and we had Mega Camp scheduled on 9/12. Isn't that amazing? The day after 9/11, and we held it anyway. And then held a second one in October for those who couldn't make it in. But the point of it is, that's kind of the unrest of the world at the time. And Gary came into this executive staff meeting in March of 2002, and he said, you know what? Our growth curve, Keller Williams growth curve, you can see it here it's steep, but it matches what Century 21's was 20 years ago, and it matches what RE/MAX's was 10 years ago. Do we want to just match them, or do we want to make history? What a great question. Gary Keller is good at asking questions. So we said, well, yeah, make history. So we got together in a room, and we on the wall brainstormed 100+ ideas for what we could do to cause ourselves to grow faster. And then Gary, Mr. Focus, said, okay, well, we can only do 5. So which 5 of these are we going to do? And we whittled it down to 5. And number 1 was write the book that changes the industry and makes Keller Williams famous.
Wow. And we're going to get into this book now. And I wanted to pick up on one thing that you were talking about just a minute ago, which is your first 6 courses were really revolving around this idea of real estate as a business.
Yes.
And we talk about that at our office a lot.
Yes.
Because I think that agents, you immediately get into real estate and you do one of 2 things. You either don't see yourself as a business owner, or you call yourself a business owner, but you don't realize that you're on the pathway of becoming a business owner. What I mean by that is, if we bring it back to Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, right? You have this idea where most of us start in the employee quadrant, and then we move into the self-employed. Right. Well, at our office, what I tell agents is, I want you thinking like a business owner from day one, and I want you recognizing that you're not a business owner, you're a self-employed individual.
Right.
And so what we want to do is teach you how to move into that. And the 7th level, the 7 levels of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, is really that pathway of progression from self-employed into business owner.
That's it. No, it is. And the interesting thing is that there's a path. That's what the MREA is. There's the path. You can't just jump one from the other. And it isn't just a mindset, oh, now I think I'm a business owner. No, you have to earn your way to the point where you have a business built on your name and your brand and your models and your systems that operates at a high level every day and gives great service and has a great reputation and sends you profit as the owner, right? Now that's a big leap from the self-employed, and there's a lot of steps to go through. And we found this right away after 2 or 3 years, but we've certainly found it since, that agents try and hurry along that path, and therefore they make mistakes.
Right.
They try and get there too fast, and not realizing that there's a journey of learning you have to do from the I do it to we do it to they do it. And that journey is really very clear. The way you operate personally is very important. If you don't have the right sales habits, sales skills, time management habits, productivity habits, if you don't have those yourself, you can't lead somebody else to them. Sorry. You can't, you're not a role model for that. So you've got to master the self-employed part of it, the I do it. And then you get to the we do it, and that's where you're there with them, and that's where you create the synergy and the teamwork and but you're there every day bringing the energy, and then the they do it is much more systems and accountability, much more standards.
And that's actually a kind of a perfect segue into the beginning of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, which is all around mindset and the way that you think and determining your big why. And that's something that's talked about a lot at Keller Williams. So talk to me a little bit about the conversations around having that not only be in the book, but having that be the first part of the book right up front.
Well, that's a great question. It's a great question. Thanks for asking that, Joe. Gary and I both believe it all begins with mindset. Now, it doesn't end with mindset because you got to build your skill set and you got to build your wisdom to go do something, but it all begins with mindset. Life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you don't have your mindset right, and I'll tell you where that shows up that a lot of people don't quite realize. When we began to build Keller Williams University, and I hate to keep going back, but this lays foundations for exactly what you're talking about. When we started building Keller Williams University, in the fall of that year, Gary asked me this great question. He said, Dave, how do our high achievers think differently than people who operate at a lower level? And we really spent 3 days hammering that out. And it was the 6 personal perspectives. See, the 6 personal perspectives are the way that high achievers think, those 6 personal perspectives. Now, we get to writing the book and we say, okay, how is it that the millionaire real estate agent thinks? And it's interesting, when I cover that with people, I go from the bottom of the list and work my way to the top, because the bottom is service, and then it's standards, and then it's competitive strategy, and then it's think with no fear, then it's possibility versus problems, then it's action-oriented, then it's big systems, big models, big goals, and finally a big why. So it's kind of funny. It builds up from the bottom, but the top is that, until you have I just call it your whys. I don't know. I think big why shows up later in your life when something really big has meaning for you. Early on, it may just mean that you're clear that you're doing this to raise your family, to provide for your family, to go in the face of those who said you couldn't do it, all those kind of things that you do. There's lots of motives, but you need to know what they are for you.
I love the way mega agent Jordan Davis out of Texas puts it. Jordan's a good friend, and Jordan says, your big why shows up as you discover little whys along the way. And she takes a lot of pressure off people when she talks about that, because people do come to you in crisis mode saying, I don't know what my big why is. I don't get it. Where is it? And they, crisis mode. But you discover that on the pathway.
It's the opposite. I do a flip flop with people on the idea of do what you love and the money will follow. I said, that's not my experience in life. It's not that. My experience in life is love what you do and the opportunities will follow. In other words, whatever you do, do it with love, do it with focus, do it with concentration, do it at the best level you can do it with passion. Whatever you do, whatever that is, and then that will expose to you the next opportunity. As an example, I said, I've only applied for one job in my life. All the rest I've been asked to take. And the reason they asked me to take it was they saw me doing my other job so well, and they wanted me on their team. So I think you just love what you do.
Dave, I'd love to transition the conversation a little bit into profit share. Sure. So you're now established with Keller Williams. The Red Book comes out, and you mentioned, before we started the recording about your profit share. And so for anybody that doesn't know, can you just kind of briefly describe what is profit share, and then tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, why it's such an important aspect of Keller Williams?
Well, yeah, I got to oversee it. See, the other side of me, because my undergraduate degree is in math and physics, right? I was a double major, math and physics. So
you're not very smart, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not. But it's not the smartness. It's the openness to analysis, right? To really understand how numbers work. And so when I came into Keller Williams, and the more I studied the profit share system, the more I was astounded at how brilliant it was, how those 7 levels work, how the distribution first big at the levels close to you, right under you, and then it goes narrow, and then it goes wide down below you in terms of the 7th level below you, which was where most of my money comes from now, goes big again in terms of the percentage. But I looked at all that and why 7 levels is so important. I even did a research study that showed how it would change if we went to 10 levels or 12, and it didn't benefit anybody but a handful of people. So if somehow or other it was just brilliantly conceived. But here's what the fundamental of profit share is, and it comes from Gary Keller. I asked him early on, I said, Gary, tell me, really, why were you okay with profit sharing? And he said, Dave, because I knew if my agents cared about my profitability, it would be bigger. So I wanted them caring about my profitability to start with. He said, the second thing I wanted was I wanted them to have the opportunity to build their own real estate company without having to leave Keller Williams and without having to take on all of the liability and management responsibility of building your own brokerage. So the more I looked at that and the more I realized that, and I have a wonderful presentation that's on Wealth Building Wednesday now, where I really show people that profit share truly is you mentioned the Kiyosaki quadrants. It's way over to the right side. It's hard to tell whether it's a business or an investment, but it's the most pure form of passive income that I have ever seen, because by you simply using your influence to bring somebody into Keller Williams, you give them to a team leader like you, and you interview them and they join and they name me as the sponsor. Then they start to build my, what I call profit share tree, my level under me, and then they recruit people and it goes in. And so what happens is you create this company under you. Like for me now, 20 years later, 24 years later, I only have 6 people in my first level. That's all I sponsored in. But in my 7 levels, I have 1,176. And that's paid me 1.6, now just cracked over $1.7 million. In the last 5 years, it's averaged about $170,000. Pure passive income to me. And I don't have to view them. In fact, here's the thing. When the market dipped, my profit share went from 66,000 down to 38,000. But it didn't go to zero, and I didn't have to declare bankruptcy, right? And then it started back up, and now it's at 170. And then somebody like Linda McKissick, who's got 32 in her first level and over 9,000 in her 7 levels, and she and Jimmy make over $1.4 million every year in pure passive income. I go, this is a real deal. And the final part of this, because you talk about what lasts. See, what Gary Keller said was, I wanted to build a company where the passive income lasts. So they can leave the business, they can leave real estate, and it's still, I'm not in real estate, I'm not getting paid in real estate, and still that money comes to me, $170,000 a year. Now, the fun thing for me is, I moved it from the bank account where it was ACHing in on the 21st of the month every month to an LLC, and the LLC is the Dave Jenks Legacy LLC, and its members are me, my wife, my son, and my brother. And what happens on the death of any of us, it all changes. But on my death, they become the owners and they become the recipients. And so it's automatic. There's nothing that has to change. Doesn't even have to go through probate, But that asset will go on forever to my estate. That's unusual. See, that's unusual. And that's what makes Keller Williams profit sharing such a strong and reality. And here's just the other side of it. It's just important. It's Keller Williams' commitment, the Keller Williams mission is to build careers worth having, businesses worth owning, and lives worth living. Well, the businesses worth owning are both the market center owners, who are more profitable than any other real estate ownership in the history of the industry, and yet they share 47% of their profits with the profit share pool, and that's passive income for people. So it's just understand that is a really good business proposition.
Yeah. Well, and because when your agents are true stakeholders in your company, like you said, Gary knew that if they were stakeholders in his profitability, it was going to grow, even though nearly half of it was being taken out. of his pocket. And I love that proposition. So you've seen, as an industry observer, you've seen a lot of reinvention. You've brought us through some of these evolutions that are happening, from franchise to corporate to even the reinvention of Keller Williams, because after a few years, Gary sat down and had to reinvent when his top agents left for RE/MAX. And he had to say in that room, what does the company that you will never leave look like? Yeah. So all of these reinventions.
That was the original reinvention, because he was a very traditional company before that, very successful based on his training, but that was the original true big reinvention. But the company's reinvented, several times, and now with him stepping back in as CEO, right?
Right. And that's what I want to pick up on right now is, as an industry watcher, Dave, I can go through the companies. Century 21, let's bring it back to them. They've had a big brand reinvention. So their reinvention has been around this outward consumer-facing brand, and that's where they see like this opportunity in the market. You have a company like EXP, who has really repackaged the profit share principle and tried to make it their own and reinvent it into something new. You have RE/MAX, who's trying to reinvent, whereas at the beginning they were for the real estate elite, right? They were real estate maximum, we don't take new agents, to now there's recruiting efforts to bring in new agents and develop this technology platform. So I'm just going through all these companies, and even we at Keller Williams are reinventing in a lot of different ways. Talk to us about reinvention, and you've had the opportunity to see all this. What are you seeing right now with the reinvention across the real estate industry?
Well, it's a time of identity confusion. It really is. It isn't amazing that that the whole society now seems to be kind of in this identity crisis. But I'll tell you what I think you need to understand is that some companies get in a box they can't get out of. So Century 21's in a box it can't get out of. It's going to keep relying on brand and big money behind it, but it's still losing money, and it isn't gaining market share because it has no mojo for the agent, right? It has a little mojo for the owner because it's an identity thing, and it gives them a little credibility with new agents. But as soon as they see it, they go, "There's nothing particularly unusual here," right? And then RE/MAX, as you said, I think RE/MAX lost its vision. If it had realized that it was above the crowd, that it was the place for high achievers, and it got disciplined in the way it sold franchises, because they didn't put them on every corner like they have, and where they're eating their own, their young. And but it's having trouble getting out of its paradigm, right? Because as it's making changes, it's becoming just another real estate company. There's nothing special about it. Now, Keller Williams is the one that then you get the corporate players, right? And the corporate players all say it's all about corporate power and our marketing ability and our money. But there's Realogy, with something like $600 billion of debt that they just can't get rid of, and their stock isn't doing very well. So it's not easy to see that they can move out of that. Now, I think the thing that's interesting now is that you have a couple of models like Compass, who is really working to use money to buy the market. They are not, their technology is nothing to speak of. They've never won awards for technology. Keller Williams has won awards for its technology from technology companies, from technology watchers, from Wired Magazine, from places like that. They've honored Keller Williams technology, not the real estate industry. Real estate industry has. Keller Williams has won the Inman Innovative Award many, many years. But the point of it is that they're coming in and they're really trying to buy the agent, and the question is, how long can you do that? How long can you put money on the table to invite somebody to join you, and buy market share that way? I've never in history seen it work long term. So that's theirs. And then EXP is just the first MLM in real estate. They just said, look, if we reward people at the front end who are recruiters, and if you think of what an MLM is, I have 2 or 3 relatives that are very good in MLM, but they're recruiters. They're not doing service. They're not building service. They're not out helping people buy and sell real estate. or cosmetics, whatever they're doing. They're building an organization, by the holly golly of what they do. And what's interesting is that a lot of people who were decent recruiters for Keller Williams have decided to go EXP, and they're taking a short-term role on that one. And here's the thing. That's why I emphasize so much how the money lasts in Keller Williams, because if I were in EXP, instead of $175,000 a year with 6 people in my top line, I would be getting $2,000 a year. Because you've got to keep building that level of wide to get deep. You've got to have 40 people in your first level that you personally sponsored, which is not easy to do. There's maybe a handful of people in all of Keller Williams. They have 40 or more people in their first level. And you've got to have that in your first level in EXP to get revenue shared down on 7 levels. And then once you stop selling real estate, you're done. You're done. And if you die, you're done. It doesn't go to your estate. There's no revenue stream going to your estate. So the only thing is that people need to understand, and a lot of people are coming back from EXP now and saying, I forgot what I had at Keller Williams, because what I have here is an environment. I have people, I have a facility, I have a broker, I have people here that are with me, I have synergy, I have hands-on training that's right here. I don't have that over at EXP. It's all distant. Everything's distance, everything's digital. So there's no sense of synergy. So one of the things, just like saying that we believe that the real estate industry needs this caring, fiduciary, competent agent at the center of the transaction helping, I believe that an agent needs a facility and a group of leaders and intelligence and other people to learn from and share with. I believe that real estate practice is a synergistic activity. And I think that that's a big advantage that Keller Williams has that others don't.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of really good points made right there. A lot of important distinctions made right there between the two different types of organizations.
And I think,
I think
what
so.
fascinates me about the conversation is just, all of these different models, all of these different, organizations. And we're not saying anyone is better or worse or anything. Like, you're speaking, Dave, truly as just this observer of what's going on. And based on your experience, what you believe is going to continue to last, like make a lasting impact. You've used the word legacy.
And that's where it'll be tested. It's free enterprise. So I love the marketplace. I love competition. I think that, that anytime the government gets involved in restricting that overly, it doesn't work in our interest. So I really believe in it. No, I think it's a good thing to have these models out there attacking each other and seeing how it goes. The agent will benefit, right? As long as they're making smart decisions for themselves. And that becomes the key. Are you making good decisions for yourself? And is the company that you're with the one that really is giving you the support and the muscle that you need to achieve your goals? And time's going to tell. But I would tell you that one of the things that's fun is to have somebody as strategically astute as Gary Keller at the top, because this guy is an avid researcher, reader, and he's watching trends, and he's become, the billionaire who has the ability to deliver on his vision. He is in the, not probably as big, but the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk category of that he can go make it happen, and he's willing to. See, I don't think Gary Keller is not one to float on his success or to just kind of, bask in that, glory or that financial stability. He wants to make a difference in the world and in the industry, and you can just feel it from him right now. The discussions going on within the regional directors groups, and a lot of those are confidential, but they're very strategic and very astute about what we need to do because we have more research than anybody else. See, what's interesting about Keller Williams is because for the entirety of the company, ever since the beginning, it's tracked every piece of production, every bit of financial information, because the profit share system required it to collect all this financial information from all its franchises. So the amount of big data it has on what makes people successful and what makes franchisees successful is amazing, right? And that no one else has that data. No one else has it. And Keller Williams is using it.
We had data before data was cool.
That's right. That's it.
And yet, and to your point, like the agent wins, right? And at the end of the day, our audience is primarily real estate agents that are in the group.
They're our partners. No, I mean,
I hope what they get from this conversation is that who you're in business with matters.
Yes.
And who is around you that is thinking at this type of level for the benefit of you, and not only you, but your team, your business, your business partners, your family, your heirs. I mean, we've touched on all of that today, and I think it's amazing. We could go on for hours and hours. I think we gotta transition now into one of our favorite parts of the show. It's our last segment. It's called 3, 2, 1 Action. It's 3 rapid fire questions that we ask every guest. Are you ready for this, Dave?
I better be, right? I better be. You're not giving any old guy, softer questions or anything like that.
Not at all. You haven't slowed down one beat. I mean, no, we're coming at you, and we're coming at you fast.
Okay, so let's have at it. Yep.
Question number 1, Joe.
Who has been the one most influential person in your life, and why?
Actually, Dale Carnegie. It's interesting. I obviously didn't know him personally. He died when I was very young, but because of his thinking, his books, not just his How to Win Friends and Influence People, but his book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. When I have this desire to be a person of wisdom who knows good things, believable things in multiple areas of my life, I think of him.
Awesome. We haven't had Dale Carnegie before, and I love that answer. Question number 2, what is and it's a little bit of a catch-22 because, I mean, this is a real estate podcast. You've written some real estate books. So other than your own books, what is the most influential book that you've ever read on your business?
On my business? Well, but it has to start personally, see? So I would say personally, okay, let me give you a personal bit. A personal would be Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns, which is all about the mindset, the cognitive mindset of a person who avoids panic and depression. And when I was depressed in my life, someone gave me that book and it just changed it totally. So Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns. And then the other one is Unleashing the Idea Virus by Seth Godin. I mean, Seth Godin is probably my favorite modern author of business and marketing. Seth Godin, Godin. Yeah,
I love Seth. I just referenced his book in a social media class we were doing, Tribes. He's
so it's interesting because if you look at every one of his, whether it was that triple, I call it the trio, which is Unleashing the Idea Virus, Permission Marketing, and Purple Cow. They're just really amazing books fundamentally. Then there's The Dip, which gets you to understand how all the things you're wanting to achieve are going to be tested by taking you through a dip. You're going to have to face the dip and be ready for it. And then as you said, Tribes, which is it's all about, are you choosing your tribe? Yeah.
I think we get Seth Godin on the podcast next. Dave, can you put in
a word for us? Get it. No, one of the things I did, so after we had finished writing, we had probably finished writing our first 4 books. And we started doing and we had done Millionaire Mondays and all that stuff. And I started doing a podcast, it was every 2 weeks, called Business by the Book. And we had on it a whole series of authors, and one of them was Seth. So I got to interview Seth, and that was special. Yeah.
Well, and Dave, for what it's worth, we do ask that same question about the book to all of our guests. And I think you'll be glad to know that the Millionaire Real Estate Agent is the answer a vast, vast majority of the time.
One of the things that thank you for saying that, one of the things that feels good when I am going out doing Zoominars around the country like I am right now, I can't tell you how many people say, Dave, your book changed my life. Dave, I finally got a real sense of what I could do in this business and how to do it. And thank you for giving me that. So that's very rewarding to an author. I promise you that.
I'm sure. Now, let me give you another excuse to have people approach you and say similar things. This is the third and final rapid fire question we have for you. And as you know, this is the All In podcast where we encourage all of our listeners to go out there and take immediate, massive action. So my question for you is, what advice, what action item do you recommend to all of our listeners today to go out there and take action upon to move the needle in their business?
Meet people and ask for business. I mean, I just think it goes right back to lead generation. Everything, once you know what you want, then there's somebody who's there whose answer has to give you a yes to get it. You just need to go find them and ask. And I think I love from Linda McKissick. She's one of my mentors, truthfully. She said, Dave, you've got to learn how to ask for business and not be attached to the answer, because you're going to get yeses, you're going to get nos. If you're a Major League Baseball player and you go to bat 10 times and make 7 outs, you're still an all-star. There's many things where there's more downside than upside, but you're going for the upside. And she said, you just have to learn to go do that. And I think that's it. And I go back and I get a little biblical. I say to people, so it's ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door shall be opened up to you. I say to a group and I say, see, that book was about prospecting. And they start laughing and I go, no, I said, maybe, don't get too light on this. I said, maybe God said this, I've created life to be abundant. All you have to do is ask, seek, and knock.
Wow.
And I think that's what it is.
Wow. Dave, this has been so much fun. We absolutely love that you've taken time out of your day to speak to Joe and I. It's so cool. You, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, I mean, have clearly changed both of our lives. That's not an overstatement. One of the most happy things that I get to do because of my role is give out copies of Millionaire Real Estate Agent to real estate agents and say, hey, whether you choose to get into business with us or not, this will move you forward in your business. And so I just want to thank you for taking time to invest into us and our listeners. Hey, if people want to find more of your content, Dave, where's the best place for them to get it?
I tell you what, it's easy. I just redid my personal website after many years. So it's davejenks.com. So www.davejenks.com. Just go there. And there's 9 placeholders of areas of wisdom. And they all be, like real estate wisdom, life wisdom, spiritual wisdom, business wisdom, all of that is there. And under each one are a set of blogs and podcasts and items that I have done. And I just recommend people go there and play with it. And one of the interesting things, I'd be interested in comments, people, because this part of my life has been kind of a lot of spiritual growth. And I really wrote an interesting set. I actually recorded them, 5 podcasts called the 7 Incarnations of God. And it's a really very astute piece that's antithetical to the atheists, right? Because there's a lot of atheists that are playing like they're scientific and all that stuff. And I tell them they're blind because, if you've got your eyes open, you're going to realize there's something going on that's bigger than you. But anyway, those 7, I would be very interested in people giving me their comments on those 7 podcasts.
Well, we'll definitely link that up in the show notes. Dave, Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, Joe and I expect you, as our listeners, our loyal fans, to smash the subscribe button, to share it with your friends, to leave us a rating and review, and above all else, to go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.